Greetings from Atolia, I'm Lord Bones, this is IMO Ballpoint Universe. Now, this game was developed in the Unity engine, but is 2D for the most part. There's a bit of 2.5D in the world selection. However, the Unity engine seems to work perfectly fine and get a full 60 FPS out of this thing. And the art style, it centres around a big biro pen sort of art style. And most part is a 2D shooter, and then there are some mild platforming parts. Now I'm going to go straight into this and hopefully show you a bit of the shooting. Now this is our ship, and this is the shipbuilding part of the actual game. Now you have two weapons, you have weapon 1 and weapon 2. Now you're generally encouraged to have a melee weapon in at least one and a ranged weapon in the other. That's because of shielded enemies, otherwise you end up dying very quickly to anyone with a shield. Now there's a very wide selection, and obviously you can here choose a gun on both slots if you really wanted to. And you actually don't think you have to. No, you do. You can't have the same one twice. Then I thought you might be able to do that either way. And you can upgrade these. I think 3 is the maximum level. This fire cannon can do more. You can have a better fire rate and better burst rate. One thing you might notice here is that it doesn't tell you any damage. I think it's because the bullets all do the same damage. I'm not 100% certain yet. All I know is that if you keep upgrading things, eventually things get better. Now we've got a third weapon slot here, the nose, which actually gives us a combo. So if we end up shooting enough enemies down without taking any damage, we can then initiate a combo. I would have upgraded this if I would have gone and used it that often, but generally I end up taking damage because the screen gets too full with bullets and things. You also have a buff, and I generally end up choosing health on that. But there are some more interesting things like seeker missiles and ink magnets, and this is all bought with in-game ink as a note, which you actually get in the actual shooting mode. So I'm going to start on launch. Now this is the level I wanted to show you because it shows a wide variety of enemies. Now throughout the main campaign, the enemy types do change quite often. You get ones that seek you around, ones with shields, like these here. These here are, I think, meant to be police. This is what this level is sort of aimed at. Oh, bloody hell, I'm so failing at this. And what you might notice from the background is that it actually tries to grab your attention quite a bit, and this happens on quite a few levels. The background generally is spinning or moving, and it can make it a little bit seasick, and it definitely wants your attention. It may be on purpose, make it more difficult, but this is definitely an issue for me because it just makes the game a little bit more difficult and hard on levels further on in the campaign. Now, you'll notice how varied the enemy types actually are, and this new guy over here who's shooting me straight on. My only real problem with this shooting mode is that you only end up holding down, oh bloody hell, just died then, holding down shoot and just moving around the actual screen. There's no real danger or skill when you get a certain way into the actual campaign. It is almost uninteresting to you after a while. Unfortunately though, or unfortunately, the game isn't actually very long. As you can see from the very bottom, it only lasts, well, it lasted me about 3 hours if I didn't do the grinding at the very end. So I can't really fault it too much on that. However, the game does seem to have double standards, and you'll see this if I get to the boss at the end. Now notice when I actually end up shooting these enemies, they turn red. Now, if I walked up to them and then didn't shoot and flew straight into their face, they would hurt me, like so. Oh, can I get killed? There, like so. However, you see here, just the lock is turning red. So he's going to fire them at his head first. Okay. Well, in a minute when he comes back, I can actually fly up here and not die because it doesn't turn red. Now there is another reason why I showed you this level, because in a minute he'll fire some handcuffs at me. I think in a minute. Or is he going to try to hit me with the baseball bat? There we go. Well, look, they don't actually go red, but they do hit me. That is very, very confusing. Very, very confusing for the very first time as well. That it just has a rule and then breaks it anyway. Either way, the bosses are definitely the main positive for this mode, because at the very end of the levels they seem to be all quite interesting and have separate parts to shoot. On some of the other bosses you have like separate guns and motors and things along those lines, and sometimes you can even destroy their weapons so they are pretty harmless to you before the end, and it becomes quite a strategical kind of game rather. So if I try to defeat this guy now properly, but actually concentrating, you'll be able to notice the music. Now, The actual gun sounds aren't exactly brilliant, but the music's not too bad. It's sort of a techno house music sort of deal. Alright, okay, I've done that level now. And this here is another way you can get actual ink. I got some just by killing enemies, but you also get it when you complete levels. Now this here is it's called a home garden. You can actually go into the infinite sky by talking to this person. Essentially that's a randomly generated, continually generated world. And if I go over here, and this here is a Wheel of Fortune type deal. And over there is just tokens, it's fine. Let's go into here. Over here is the second part of that bottom bar, which is exploring. I'm going to go this way so I can talk to some people first, a little bit. So, people in the world you talk to, and sometimes they give you missions, sometimes they don't. I don't know whether this person will give me a mission now. Nope, never mind. But you can also get to these in the pause menu, so if you ever want to go back and maybe get a better score, you can quite easily. Now the worlds are pretty neat, and as you can see here, there's a good reason why I chose this part of this level as well, because, wait on this part, over here rather, you can see how good the sort of 2.5D style is. It sort of looks like it was built in Flash or something, which is pretty neat. I think it's a nice art style. I think he'll give it a mission actually. Yes, he will. The owls, man. How could they betray us? And I've got all stars in that one. Okay, so this mode over here generally serves as a world selection, and it sort of tells you the story as well, as to why you actually are doing what you're doing. What you're doing essentially is fighting a war. Not really a spoiler because you learn that very, very early on. Not here yet. Right, however, there is a sort of humongous downside to this, like really annoyed me, which is the platforming. Now, I'm probably going to have to change, bloody hell, into a different mode in a second. Because at the moment I'm using a mouse to control this. So when I move left and right, it moves left and right. When I move left and right though, he moves left and right. So I'm having to follow this guy around here. Now this is a little bit annoying when it comes to moving platforms. And these here are, believe it or not, the easier of the platforms. I want to get to the really hard one in a second. But using a mouse, this is almost impossible to do. Oh bloody hell. And he also seems to stumble as well, like that a little bit. It seems to me, just a little bit, like these bits were only really included just to add a bit more. I'm going to have to change over, I think. Okay, so now I'm using my keyboard instead. There we go. And this, when you're actually using a keyboard, is actually playable. It is actually not terrible, but the platforming is really, really difficult, even with a keyboard, just because of the way the controls actually work. It's not difficult because the platform itself is difficult, but purely because the controls you're using to control your little guy just don't feel right. They feel gooey, they feel slightly unresponsive, and it seems to stumble all the time. So even if you predict your platform properly, you'll still sometimes not even make it. I don't even think I'm going to be able to get to the part that's much more difficult than this. Maybe if I could just concentrate a little bit. Luckily, luckily the backgrounds in this section are actually moving as well, because that would even be more difficult, but either way. Now, there isn't a whole lot of the moving platforms. There we go, now I'll be able to show you now. But there are quite a few of the stationary ones. It's this way. Yes, these tiny ones. This part here was quite annoying for me, that's why I'm showing you this, but it is fairly early in the story, so I'm not really ruining any platformy stuff, if that was something you were looking forward to. It definitely seems though as if this here was just padding a little bit, because the shooter is actually, although we don't do it for very long, it's about a 3-hour game, is fairly interesting I suppose. It's serviceable and enjoyable to some of the levels actually have some sort of atmosphere, so it's quite fairly enjoyable just to fly around and shoot things. It's a bit of harmless, casual sort of nonsense, but it is still fairly enjoyable if you want to kill a couple of hours, and that was very, very lucky of me. See if I can beat, oh bloody hell, I'll try and see if I can beat that bit. But either way, so I think that's practically everything on the exploration side, and that's really all the game actually is, other than some light story elements using the text earlier on. This was IMO Ballpoint Universe. This is $4 on Steam, or £3, or €4 depending on where you are, and not on sale at the moment. It's not a bad game, I would say, and maybe worth picking it up if you need to kill 3 hours, but I would say that the platforming definitely gave me frustration, and the shooting does get a bit samey. So even though they have an infinite generating universe, it does get very boring very, very quickly. I found it to be a test of stamina and not a test of actual skill after you get so far in. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.